Okay, I think we're going to go ahead and get started. Thank you all for joining our panel, and thank you in advance to our panelists for being here. So this panel, the goal for this panel is to talk about what it's like to build a biotech company in LA. And by LA, we're kind of taking a broad view of that. Jim and I were just talking about the geography of what we mean by LA a few minutes ago. So our companies on this panel go from, all the way out in City of Hope to Agora Hills, west side of LA. So it's a very broad geography, but it's kind of a regional thing. And what I really want to get out of this panel is hear about the challenges and opportunities of doing something in this region specifically, and thinking about capital, talent, infrastructure, technology, all these things that go into building a successful biotech company. What is it like to tap into that and access that here in this region? So I'll let my panelists introduce themselves, talk for a few minutes about their companies and what they're doing, and then we'll get into some specific questions.
I probably will get started. My name is Tseng. So I'm from UCLA, faculty in pharmacology. So I'm the founder of Eximius DX. So Eximius DX is a company devoted to conduct tumor surface protein profiling in the blood. And we try to use it for detection and monitoring of the cancer. And one more sentence about the company. The company obtained FDA breakthrough device designation for its application in liver cancer detection. That's it.
Great. I'm Linda Malkas. I wear a couple of hats. One, I'm the Dean of Translational Science at the City of Hope. And the other is I am a co-founder of a company called RLL. A great story on translation. I won't bore you with it, but we drugged an undruggable target, cancer-selective target. Was able to develop a small molecule. It's now in 2 clinical trials at City of Hope, phase 1, showing some wonderful results, including complete remissions out over a year, almost a year now. So take it.
That's great. Hi, everyone. I'm Jim Robinson. I'm the CEO of A2 Biotherapeutics. We are a cell therapy company. We've been focused on solid tumors for most of our career. We are focused on both ex vivo and in vivo cell therapy. You heard a lot about in vivo this morning at the opening plenary session. Our focus is really leveraging our heritage in cancer to learn more in vivo. So we have programs that will focus on cancer as well as focus on autoimmune disease with our in vivo program. So I'm glad to be here.
Sumant Ramachandra, and I think I have to update my picture from there, but my bio. I am the CEO of Lutris Pharma. Lutris is actually an Israeli company. It was founded by Tony Ribas, who's in the audience, who's a well-known faculty member at UCLA. But my LA story is going to focus on my last company also, which is Impact Bio, which was formed in LA from UCLA and was acquired eventually in 2024. Great experiences that we had in LA.
Hi, everyone. Guy Rosenthal, CEO of Oryn Therapeutics. We're a peptide therapeutic company that actually spun out of USC, and we're developing a unique class of microcyclic peptides to treat autoimmune diseases and chronic inflammatory diseases. And the uniqueness of our peptides that are really able to drug what used to be up until recently undruggable targets. And our first program, we're at preclinical stage as an ADAM17 immune modulator. And actually, a fun fact on me being here, I used to work at TDG years back and was actually the licensing officer that did the deal back then with Tony, Professor Ivan Shea, and they went into Calthera, then Impact. So it's somewhat like a closed circle.
Well, thank you. So, Jim, I want to start with you because you're in a region of LA that has, I think, a lot of infrastructure, a lot of established companies. So can you maybe just for this audience, tell us a little bit about that region? It's foreign even to me, living here on the west side for 20 years. I don't have a lot of great visibility into what's going on there, but there is a lot going on there. There's incubator space, there's Amgen spinouts, there's a ton of talent. So maybe could you just provide almost like a pitch overview of that region and why you would want to build a company there?
Sure. So first of all, we have the best talent in the world, right? We have people from A2 sitting over there. So let's start with that. So we're up near the Thousand Oaks area, so Agora Hills, Westlake Village. So we talked as part of this meeting prep. We've been very fortunate to be able to attract really amazing talent at our company. We do everything from manufacturing, so obviously cell therapy manufacturing is no easy task. So we do that very successfully. We have full R&D capabilities. We have a full clinical development team. And we have a little over 100 people, and we're all based on our campus in Agora Hills. We have been very fortunate to be able to attract people that have come from the surrounding kind of ecosystem, whether that be Amgen or whether it be Kite as an example, given Kite's experience in cell therapy. So, for us, when we think about building a great company, it's always going to start with the people, right? That's going to be the key, that those great people are really going to power the science forward and be able to contribute to that. There's also, this collaborative spirit in the surrounding community where we've been able to work well together outside of A2 with other companies to accomplish goals too. So it's a little kind of tight community that's really benefited one another. So we've been very fortunate to be able to, leverage that tight community to build a very successful company.
What about some of my other panelists? Most of you are doing what I would consider virtual companies, not a lot of infrastructure. How have you, I'm curious to hear from each of you, actually. We'll go down the line because they are very virtual compared to A2, I'd say. In what ways have you leveraged the LA ecosystem, whether it's for people or technology, to advance what you're doing? Maybe we'll just start with you, Tseng.
So I guess we are relatively early, but already in clinical phase. So we actually currently located in CNSI incubator. I'm not quite sure the incubator, our manager, Nikki, is over here. But anyway, the advantage of being in UCLA's incubator is we could really utilize capital instrument on the campus. So offset a lot of initial capital investment. So that's one advantage. Second, we could always run into talented minds, our clinician colleagues, to entertain them with our idea, then verify. And number three, I would say that's a great advantage of being on the campus in the neighborhood. We have a UCLA Cedars-Sinai Medical Center. That allows us to obtain clinically well-annotated sample to do proof of concept. So as a result, we have a data to set us in the stage to go to FDA, talking to them, obtain our breakthrough device designation in a way to help to fast track the approval process of our diagnostic device.
You're still in the incubator on campus, right?
Yeah, we are still in the incubator and looking forward the day to graduate.
We want to keep you. Linda, maybe can you tell us about the history of your company and how maybe it's tapped into the region in some way?
Sure. Well, actually, I was very fortunate to be at City of Hope. I was recruited there almost 15 years ago, and I came with an undruggable target. I was told, even by Big Pharma, that no one, quote unquote, no one will ever make a drug against the target. But City of Hope, I don't want to sound like I'm too much of a cheerleader, but I am going to be a cheerleader in this instance. I was attracted to them because they had put together an infrastructure that would support actually taking something from the lab bench and moving it all the way to the clinic right on campus. And we have a couple of good successes along that way. But I was able to work with my colleagues at City of Hope, developed a small molecule. I was even able to do the GLP synthesis on the campus itself to get to the FDA. We also have an internal regulatory office. All these pieces are really important. All you guys that are doing this kind of work understand how important it is to have a really strong infrastructure around you. but also and then now, as I said earlier, we are in 2 different clinical trials, one solid tumor, one in leukemia. The larger elements of LA. Now, I've had the opportunity to work in 5 different institutions across the United States, including Massachusetts and, just across the whole U.S. And I have to say, LA is probably one of the richest environments for getting things done. Everybody you need is somewhere nearby, and if you don't know who they are, you just call somebody, and they will know who to get to. Seriously, we have, as I said, I've been in a lot of different environments, short of like Boston, okay, for getting really talented, well-trained people to work with you, actually having people who have a lot of business know-how. It's here. So now for where we are, as I said, the 2 clinical trials are at City of Hope, but now we have to go to, to other centers. And the centers are, I don't have to go far, to the other centers. Also, I want to point out that there is probably not a disease that exists that there isn't an expert in here in LA. There are some very rare diseases, rare cancers that you can actually, UCLA, USC, the know-how is there. So I'm not going to say it was easy to do this at all, but everything you need is here. I mean, I don't know if Howard Zhu is here. He's a wonderful person, a resource for, incubator, and he has workshops for entrepreneurs. There's a number of those that are put on at the different campuses. The thing that I think will help more is if we can really build more of the infrastructure supporting the development of biotech here in LA, we will better be able to retain some of the wonderful young people that we have been training at our different institutions. So that's kind of my story.
So if I could pick up on that, I think a lot of things are here. I think one thing, and Guy and Sumant, I think you could really speak to this, it's not here it's here a little bit, but is capital, right there. So there is, a fund in Agora that, got started with Westlake. There's Vita, I think, is here. But what's been your experience, financing a company in LA and the challenges with that? And has that been a challenge, compared to, if you sit in Boston, it was, you pick up the phone, you call Polaris, you call Atlas, it's not like that here. So what's been your experience with that in LA and some of the challenges on the financing side?
So I can speak to 2 experiences in LA. One is Impact Bio. I joined the company soon after it formed, and we actually moved to the outskirts of LA in West Hills, which is right near Calabasas, and very much like A2, manufacturing, ran all the clinical trials, about 110 people at the end before we got acquired. I have to say that the investors bet on the CEO and management team, okay, and their ability to really tell that compelling story that attracts other investors. So you can't just attract one, you have to attract others. Our investor base, I'm going back, none of them were from LA. One of them has moved and built a house in LA, but he's not really from LA. He actually invests in many, many companies all over the world. But I will say the piece that's really important, I think from an investor perspective, is can you then attract the talent and additional funds later on to help drive the programs forward? And if this is the second time I've worked with Dr. Tony Ribas. He was one of the founders of the previous company at Impact Bio with Yvonne Chen and others, and then he is the scientific founder of the company. I'm in Lutris Pharma, which is Israeli-based, but I'm in LA. Okay. And Tony picked up the phone and said to one of our previous investors in the other company and said, hey, LABEST is happening. Sumant's going to be there. Do you want to come and meet us? And he met with us today. and he's a big investor. Okay, just showed up for a few hours, 2 hours, met with us for an hour, had lunch with us for 45 minutes, and then went to his next meeting, and he doesn't even live in LA. So I think investors will come, and I think it'll be based on the idea. Is there unmet need you're going to solve by the idea you're going forward, and how are you versus other available therapies and other emerging therapies? And this biotech is constantly changing, so you have to compare yourself to emerging therapies also. And with that idea, can you tell that compelling story to help drive that science forward into the clinic and potentially into commercial potential or an exit? And I think we have the talent. That's not the issue. I think we need to make sure that people recognize we can form companies in LA. And even though Lutris is not a LA-based company, Lutris came and said, Sumant, doesn't matter where you live, we're an Israel-based company. And my part-time chief medical officer also lives in LA area. So these things happen, I think, through the people you know and the relationships you have.
I completely agree with everything that Sumant said, and I'll even add, obviously the LA ecosystem has been very fertile in terms of spinning out companies as a result of the big academic presence and the research institutions and the hospitals, and the talent that's coming out, and the fact that the proximity to the science, to the foundational science. With respect to institutional capital, I think post-COVID, it has been somewhat democratized, and the human capital has also been democratized to a certain degree. Talents across the country, even beyond the US. For us, at least, as a spin out of an academic institution here at USC, the proximity, because at the end of the day, many of those companies, even Impact or Oryn, the proximity to the academic institution, to the scientific founding team, the whole technology transfer process that is not necessarily as straightforward, for sure, in cell therapy, gene therapy, but also in our space of microcyclic peptides. I think that today, post-COVID, the ability to build hybrid teams, understand exactly what different component sits on the value chain and value creation in a biotech company, from depending on the stage, obviously, and understanding how to connect really the talent to the key components within your research organization to build a company, to deliver all the milestones, to really get into preclinical stages and then into clinical trials. So I think it's at least in our experience, the access to capital and the fact that we're in LA does not make any difference. Doesn't really put us in a different bracket. Yes, actually being in Boston, we can actually just in a very small geography, you can just throw a stone and you're gonna hit like 3, 4, 5 different VCs and grab coffee with everyone, which helps. But with the events like this here, when it's pretty astounding to see how still VCs across the country are coming here, pharmaceutical companies. You see the impressive panel that opened the day today. There's so many different opportunities. So actually for companies that are being established here, understanding that some of the human capital component, depending on the subject matter expertise, will reside elsewhere, still enable you to build a very strong footprint in the region.
So you raised this point about the democratization of kind of company formation post-COVID, which is really interesting, I think. And I'm curious to dig into this a little bit more, because I started my career in Boston, which is super Boston-centric, or at least was, right? So, the funds I knew only looked at Boston companies, and everyone it was all inward-facing. But I don't know, maybe, Jim, can you talk a little? Is that still the case, or do you find that the funds that you meet with from the Bostons of the world and the San Franciscos see LA as kind of on an equal footing now, or is a place that they'll look at deals seriously? I mean, is that your experience in the world?
Like we talked about, I've been in Boston, I've been in Chicago. I think it goes back to the points that were raised. So much, it comes down to like this critical mass of science and innovation that happens in a particular region at a particular time. And so that draws interest, right? The question is, how do you maintain that interest, and almost, if you don't have it, build it? And so in my past life, I was involved in building an incubator in Chicago, because for so long, any of the innovation at the Northwestern's, U of C, Rush, U of I, went to the coast, went to San Francisco, went to Boston. So the idea was, how do you create a forum in Chicago to be able to bring academia, industry, and money, venture capital, private equity together to really foster a community which wasn't there. So we had to almost create this community. It was called Matter. So Matter's been around for over a decade now. It's helped raise billions of dollars for innovation, and most of that innovation is now staying in the Chicagoland area, which is, I think, the impetus behind what UCLA is doing with building their incubator, a mile away or so. So I think, number one, if you don't have the reputation and you're not getting the level of attention that you think you should get, having a UCLA of the world help build the critical mass, create the buzz, create the attention, is going to be really important. And as we've talked about, is now coming out of LABEST, how do you keep it going, right? Is there a quarterly forum that can exist that brings together, again, academia, industry, and venture capital as an example, to foster an ongoing dialogue so that there is as much recognition of what's happening in Los Angeles as there has historically been in, let's say, San Francisco or Boston, and now in San Diego. So I think UCLA plays a huge role in this region in creating that type of opportunity to really build a tight-knit collegial community. And I think it's happening. And I think from a venture, to answer your last point, is venture capital will go where the science is most compelling, that will create the breakthrough, that will generate the next medicine that's going to really meet that medical need. So they'll go where the science is.
Linda and Tseng, has that been your experience too, that you feel that this has been democratized in some way being in LA, or do you feel like you're kind of in a, not a backwater, but a more of a kind of
No, I never
suburb
did.
of?
Well, though I find it funny because you and I were talking earlier, and you go, "Well, City of Hope is so far away." I grew up in New York City, and I don't understand this thinking. Actually, I don't think of City of Hope as so far away, except traffic-wise. Maybe that's the
definition of
okay.
far in LA.
But no, I don't look at LA as a deficit, except maybe, as you said, for the funding type of seeking. But people can, the prior panel talking about, getting the, people are learning. Coming from the academic side and having been in a number of different institutions, not every institution is the same. There are some institutions that are way behind, like when should we make a disclosure, when should we patent? Can I allow the faculty to actually move forward to create a company? I mean, there's still, not that I see here, but there are plenty of academic institutions that really frown on faculty creating companies, and that the academics don't know when to not put their nose into it. I'll be honest, but that's it.
So I would like to spin from different angle, talking about funding. We have our NIH officer sitting in our audience, Dr. Zhao. So I want to emphasize for us serving academia, we actually, for years, we built up our grant writing muscle. So good opportunities to approach to NIH, where we have our good network and get funded. Non-dilutive funding is very sweet, and it's get you started. And the other thing I want to point out is, Earl, sitting next to you, I have to say a few good words about our technology development. And I think bridging us to many funding opportunity, and that I think our technology development group have been doing a great job, and I benefit from being part of that. Yeah.
Thank you. Guy,
Yeah, I had actually two additional points to make. One, maybe a different spin on what I said before. It is true that in hubs like Boston and the Bay Area, there's such a high concentration of funds and companies and entrepreneurs, medical research institutions and academic institutions in a similar way like here, but the abundance of this ecosystem creates some sort of a natural bias for funds to spend more time in those regions, and just as a direct result of numbers, sheer volume of companies and entrepreneurs and funds, they just get to see those companies first, and especially the serial entrepreneurs that are much more, call it, quote unquote, fundable. So the job on, I would say, on the early stage science and entrepreneurs and companies that are coming out of this region is we require to be more rigorous, more proactive, support of the tech transfer offices with the outreach. And we need to be much more, we need to travel, but we need to be much more creative with how we're going to be seen on the map of those funds. And then for those funds, like you said, the Atlas or the TRVs or whatever, or the Canaans of the world will not just randomly show up in LA on a random Monday. They will in Boston. And the second point I wanted to make is the VCs, at least coming out of this biotech winter over the past few years in terms of funding, you have seen a split in terms of many funds that had poor experience or poor performance with placing bets on a variety of different companies. Many funds have shifted to funding great science, but clinical science. So they're going to fund only companies that are phase 1B with some early efficacy readout onwards. And there's hundreds of companies like that today. And some funds are still funding preclinical discovery stage companies, but the competition has become significantly more fierce. So more of the onus on us here to really focus on value-driven data, teams, talent, and how we can really stand out.
So I lived in Boston. I trained at Mass General and lived there in the 1990s and early 2000s, and it was not the hub. It eventually became a hub, right? So every place goes through this transformation, and it takes a few catalytic events for that to happen. And when I was there, at least, and I saw it actually happening in Brookline, where I lived, and then where I worked in the North End in Boston, there was only like Genzyme and Biogen in town, right? And then suddenly you saw Merck was building right near Brookline, building, and then so-and-so was building. Then the NIBR started. Mark Fishman, who was one of my first attendings, was the first head of NIBR. These things are not almost planned. The incubator is fantastic. I think it'll start concentrating companies and giving a chance for those companies to be built here. And that will start attracting external investments. And then hopefully with the help of UCLA and TDG, that can be spun out into smaller companies. And then that builds critical mass. There's talent. There's a lot of talent in this area. I'm not even worried about the talent. I'm worried, will the talent stay, okay, after this is done, okay, after their education is done, or after their postdoc is done, or they get their first job here, and will they go somewhere else? And so there was a comment in our prep call that, what can we do? I think, Jim, you had made it, to coordinate more. Okay, not get together once a year, but what can we do to be part of that ecosystem, to build that ecosystem? Because once families move to a certain area and they start getting a job, and then that company transacts or fails or whatever happens to a company, they move on to next. They typically don't get on a plane and go to the other coast again, back and forth. They build a family, okay? And we have to figure out how to support the ecosystem, not just from the professional standpoint, but will people stay? And I think that's really important.
Yeah, I think your point about organic growth, I think, is a really good one. I agree. It happens organically. It happens because of a lot of chance events. So, and actually, on that kind of no, before we open up to Q&A, I'm curious to hear from each of you. What would be your kind of advice to the LA region? How do we take this to the next level? What are some very concrete things that we, the university, could do, but others can do as well, and to take this region, we're not going to be Boston, but how do we take LA to the next level, in terms of company formation and keeping companies here? What can we do, whether it's TDG, the university, whoever it is? What's your wish list?
Well, I probably start. As a faculty entrepreneur, my suggestion is stay on in your laboratory, prepare your clinical data if possible, as far as you can go. Then I think Technology Development Group, TDG, has been doing very good job in bridging us. And we have many successful companies as example. So just take on, and that would be my way of saying prepare yourself with data, with the people, then take on those momentum. It's already pretty significant, just central around the UCLA.
So, it's building like a super infrastructure now. So, one is, every institution here in LA has its own infrastructure for trying to move things along. Some do it better than others. But you're looking at a supra infrastructure now. And it would almost, if I had my dreams, technically the larger institutions have these things called CTSAs. That would be, getting some government resources and thinking in it. And actually those are supposed to be working together, those institutions that have those kind of federal funding. You would think that if we all aligned, because we need state support for this kind of thinking to create a super infrastructure, and the institutions themselves to think about, how can we work together? And actually, I'm as I said, I'm fortunate because I was in City of Hope, and they have an infrastructure for moving something off a bench. But now, to create this kind of ecosystem that you want, these institutions have to come together and actually go, we'll do it together.
Yeah, I think that communal aspect ties in, Jim, also to what you've been saying, that knitting the community together, I think, is.
Yeah, so building on that, I would say it's also incumbent upon leadership, right? So leadership at academia, industry, venture capital, to, number one, understand the value of LA. And everyone is really on the same page, or as they say, singing from the same hymnal. Like this morning in the opening session, just understanding everything that TDG has done is really impressive. So having those kind of facts and figures that everyone knows what LA offers from beginning to end as to why it's the right place to come to not only learn, but also to build a business would be really helpful. And then creating a forum for leadership to come together and support, like an incubator. How do we help get the incubator off the ground? How do we make sure it's full at capacity? And then being able to create the critical mass of science here that can't be missed. Like, it's a must-have. Those are just very high-level things, but again, I go back to the point of helping to build a collaborative, collegial community across the board is what will really put LA consistently at the top of the list as must-see places, or must-see places to live or to work or to go. So that's just my view from experience.
Healthcare's not going anywhere, right? Because all of us depend on it. So I think we have to remember this is a long marathon, okay? And the more we can bring different types of technologies into a geographic region versus saying, this is the city that I would go for cell therapy, and this is the city I'd go for ADCs. It shouldn't be that way. It should be where diagnostics, therapeutics, devices, and all of that. When you think about the corridor from even Irvine up to Santa Barbara as the greater LA area, the ecosystem exists, but it's such a big ecosystem, and it's made worse because of traffic, okay? But then that's the reality. But the collaboration does not have to depend on that, especially now that we're in the virtual world. So healthcare is, we think of it, I grew up in the world of pharma, but I spent a huge chunk of my time in pharma and devices. And I saw that there were device people and there were pharma people, and I had R&D in both. And they get together once a week in my leadership team, but they really didn't work together, okay? But healthcare, as I saw a family member in a hospital bed laying there, it didn't matter to them whether it was a device or a pharmaceutical going into the vein or a diagnostic. They were being treated by healthcare items. And the more collaboration we have across the spectrum, the higher chance something comes through that. And I think if one advice is there, someone said about government, Massachusetts recognizes it's one of its largest employment bases, healthcare, and pays attention to it. I don't think there's a lot of other places that do that. And if this geographic region wants to be successful, I think the government has to step up and say, I am going to pay attention to it because it is a high skill area. It attracts talent that tends to stay, okay, because of the level of skill that's needed. They're not transient talent. And it builds a huge amount of economic value, not just in the hospital systems and the research labs, but in the employment and the companies and technologies that spin out of here. And eventually some companies get bought. That's good for this area, and people move on to the next one. That's just the general thoughts of advice.
So I think I'm benefiting from being the last one to speak, and it's going to be a combination of a few elements that were said. But if you're looking at a company or an ecosystem, I'm looking at it from, there's like 5 pillars or 5 components for a successful ecosystem or robust and so on and so forth. So you have an abundance of technology or innovation, inventions, however you want to call it, talent, capital, infrastructure, and culture. So those are 5 critical components. And if you're looking at it objectively in this region, we have different volumes in different regions where we have all 5. And companies come and go. We've seen companies, being built, folded. But the one thing that really stays for decades and has been so robust is really the component of academic institution, hospital systems, and research institutions. And those I see as an anchor. An anchor, and has an extremely important role of continuing to look at every single one of those pillars, along with the stakeholders, and I completely support what Jim was saying before, with the leadership of companies, of institutional capital, and state, to really look at every single one of those pillars and see how can we form different groups to really put more effort, more emphasis, and continue and iterate to make those better. And the anchor is a beautiful anchor. So many hospital systems around here, consecrated, so many academic institutions. We see what's going on here, how this conference grew exponentially almost from 2019, from the first year until today. So I think that, to me, those 5 pillars and focusing on the anchor from both state, federal government, and the institutions to be the conduit, we are the lead of this effort, is how I see kind of my pipe dream for the region.
Well, thank you. I want to open it up to Q&A. We have 7 minutes left, so any questions from the audience? Otherwise, we're going to end early.
Don't all jump at once.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Is there someone?
Looked like you were
Yeah.
raising your hand.
Good. Thank you. I think this would be a good one for you, Jim, because it felt to me for a while like we were going down like the LA's like the cell therapy, kind of region. And I don't know, maybe what's your thought on this? Like, it seemed like there was a critical mass of that for a while. And
LA is a cell therapy region. I don't know. What I would say is, I don't think there's any particular region. I think what happens is, it was said this morning by Dan from Lilly, is that there are certain sciences that just come first, and all of a sudden people gravitate towards them, and all of a sudden, you've got this almost, critical mass of thinking that is, hey, let's go there, because that seems to be a proven path, that seems to be, de-risked to some extent. So you end up just having a particular science be popular at a particular time. I think for us, I'm just speaking for A2, is the benefit we had was the belief that, with cell therapy breakthroughs that we saw in blood, that if you could harness that learning and also the underlying technology and apply it to solid tumors, you could really create innovative therapies for the most difficult to treat cancers. And it just so happened that setting that up, we were close to where Kite was located. So we were able to really draw a lot of Kite folks over, but also the founder is from Amgen, and it was his philosophy as well, as how do you harness the immune system of the body to fight cancer. And so it just was the perfect marriage of the science and the proximity to folks that had done it before that we were able to pull it off. But I wouldn't say there's any particular science that is specific to LA that you should focus on. I think it's about where is the puck going versus where is it today. So what do we want to be thinking about in terms of what's important 10 years from now? What are the difficult challenges we want to solve in 10 years? And then really focus on how do we bring that science to life here in LA.
Yeah, I mean, it seems to me that if you look at the experience of like Linda and Tseng guy, it's a very organic process, right? They're going where the science, I think, leads, and all these great minds are in LA. There's a lot of innovation. I think it's how do we tap into that and support it, and see where it goes. I think it's a very organic process. Yeah.
No, just to add to Jim, I think it's perfectly fine to celebrate the fact that the LA region is a cell therapy hub. I think it's a great way to celebrate, and I think it's an amazing anchor. I think the community in general wouldn't be able to walk and chew gum at the same time to celebrate the fact that it is a cell therapy hub, and there's so much more. And it became a cell therapy hub, like I said, it's not a blip, right? If it came from the different companies that were formed from, whether it was, Atara and Kite and innovation coming from academia. So it took obviously more than several years, but and I'm saying it as a peptide therapeutic CEO, would love to see more stories like those stories in other modalities and in other disease areas. And I think it's great that we have that as an anchor. We can definitely monetize to do more.
Any other questions? We have 3 minutes. Yeah, please.
I have a little experience here in the sense that, when I was making a decision to leave large company, that one of my classmates from MGH, who's in a very prominent VC fund in Boston, reached out to me and said, move here, okay? And we'd love to have you as CEO of one of our companies. And I was looking for warmer weather for personal reasons for my wife, but we ended up not doing that and moving to LA. But I will say that this is where academic institutions and government can help those VCs recognize that there is an incentive to be here and to set up companies here. I think many times, I was not an LA person in 2021. I only moved here in November of 2021 from Chicago. And before that, I was an East Coast person for a long, long time. All my training and working was there. So people are willing to move for the right job, okay? And leadership is willing to even commute for the right job. And I think you have to just make that compelling for the fund to say, I want to set up here. I will tell you that founders play a big role, along with the tech transfer offices of the various institutions, to say, we have some of our laboratories here, we're continue to do some of the work, we can help the company as it's forming in the early stages. And naturally, I think companies start forming here. When Impact Bio was formed, Yvonne Chen and Tony and Chris Pukes also all doing still work in the area. Okay, it didn't just say, here you go. Okay, they worked with us. Yvonne was on our board. Tony was a board observer. We kept them all up to date. I worked with Amir, with Mark and others. So those are all good things.
And I'd add is we're fortunate because Vita Ventures is one of our largest investors, and they're LA-based, and they're very active and engaged. I would say not only with us, but in the broader LA community. So my experience has been so far pretty positive with LA investment in our business.
All right. I just want to say thank you very much to our panelists, a really diverse panel, really interesting experiences. So I've learned a lot. Thank you to our audience, and hope you enjoy the rest of the afternoon.